Behind a crumbling barn in rural Texas, authorities made a heartbreaking discovery. A bear cub who had spent most of his short life crammed into a rusted trap. The metal bars had turned orange with age, and the floor was matted with straw and waste. The cub, curled in the farthest corner, barely lifted his head as the rescue team approached. He didn't growl. He didn't run. He just trembled, his round black eyes vacant, like all his instincts had burned out long ago. When the rescue team opened the cage, he didn't move. They had to carry him out gently, wrapped in a tarp like something fragile. At the West Hollow Wildlife Refuge, the staff moved carefully, quietly. They had seen injured animals before, wounded eagles, hit-and-run foxes, even orphaned cougars, but nothing quite like this. The cub was physically underweight, with matted fur and healing cuts along his belly. But what hit hardest was his silence. Not a grunt, not a huff, just the faint sound of his shallow breathing, like he was trying not to exist. They named him Bramble, not because it suited him, but because it reminded them of something wild, something he used to be. Dr. Arlo Briggs, the lead veterinarian, shook his head after the first examination. He's not feral, he's not tame, he's just shut down. The sanctuary's manager, a tall, quiet man named Reed Halbrook, assigned him the most remote enclosure, surrounded by pine and mesquite. He needs quiet, Reed said. Let him feel the wind again, smell the real world. We'll wait. For days, Bramble lay curled against the back wall. The staff placed bowls of fresh fruit, fish, and honey nearby. The food remained untouched. A motion sensor revealed he barely moved at night. Sometimes he stared into the trees. Most of the time, he stared at the dirt, like he was looking for a way through it. Then came a man named Cal. Cal wasn't a vet or a therapist. He was a wildlife technician who had spent 10 years building bridges in forest corridors and installing tracking cameras in hard-to-reach mountain zones. He came to West Hollow to help fix an enclosure gate. And on his first day, passing Bramble's habitat, he stopped. He set his toolkit down, crouched, said nothing, just looked. And Bramble, without so much as a twitch, looked back. The next day, Cal came back. After finishing his shift, he brought a folding stool and a thermos of coffee. He sat near the fence and watched the trees, didn't speak, just sat. On the third day, he brought a book, read aloud a few lines, then stopped, then sat in silence again. Every day, he came. By the 6th day, Bramble turned his head. That was the first change. Reed watched from the main office window. He's responding to that guy, he murmured. Dr. Briggs raised an eyebrow. The technician? Reed nodded. Let's not interrupt it. By the 2nd week, Bramble was standing when Cal arrived. Still at a distance, but watching. Sometimes shifting his weight side to side, like he couldn't decide if he was nervous or curious. Cal started talking more, about random things. The weather, the way the sunlight made the pine needles sparkle. Once he told Bramble about a dream he'd had where a bear drove a tractor. He chuckled. You'd probably do a better job than the guy I worked for last season. Bramble blinked slowly, and the next morning the fruit bowl was empty. By the 3rd week, Cal brought cooked fish and set it just past the gate. Bramble didn't approach while he was there. But 30 minutes after Cal left, the fish was gone. Good, Cal whispered the next day, seeing the cleaned-off plate. You're starting to remember. On the 23rd day, Bramble took the food while Cal was still sitting there, no closer than 10 feet. But he came out, heavy paws padding softly across the dirt, grabbed the salmon, and retreated to the shade. Cal smiled so wide it hurt his face. A month in, Bramble would sometimes walk to the gate before Cal arrived. He'd grunt softly, just once, and sit. Cal never tried to reach through the fence, never tried to touch him. He just talked, read, or hummed. And one afternoon, Bramble came close. Not all the way, but close enough that Cal could hear him breathing. 2 months in, Bramble followed Cal along the fence line when he left. When Cal sat just inside the gate, still separated by a mesh barrier, Bramble would lie down nearby. Their breathing would sync. I think he's got a rhythm again, Dr. Briggs said, watching the footage. He's coming back to himself. And then, something impossible happened. One cool morning, Cal arrived to find Bramble already waiting, but not alone. Beneath Bramble's front leg, nestled tight, was a tiny bear cub. So small, it looked like it had been scooped out of a dream. At first, Cal thought his eyes were lying, but as he stepped forward, Bramble stood slowly, lifting the cub in his mouth, and walked to the gate. He placed the cub down, then looked at Cal. Like he was saying, "Look what I have! Look what I can do now!" Cal crouched. His heart thudded. He didn't move closer, just watched. The cub gave a squeaky growl and pressed against Bramble's side. Cameras revealed the truth. A wild female bear had been spotted several times near the sanctuary's outer woods. One night, she brought the cub, left it near Bramble's enclosure, then vanished. Maybe she'd been watching. Maybe she saw how he sat with Cal. Maybe she believed he could raise their cub. And Bramble had taken the cub in. They named her Fern. Fern was everything Bramble hadn't been. She was noisy, messy. She climbed trees inside the enclosure, tried to chew Cal's boots when he sat too close. Once, she stole his book and waddled off with it. Bramble watched her antics with what could only be called amusement. He rumbled low, correcting her gently with a paw if she got too bold. But mostly, he let her be wild. Cal became a part of their odd family. He never reached for Fern. But she reached for him, sat in his lap, pulled on his beard, played with his shoelaces. She trusted him immediately. "She's wild," Dr. Briggs noted, "but not afraid. It's different." Cal nodded. "She's never been broken." By the time Fern was 9 months old, she was climbing everything in sight. She sniffed the sky constantly, stood on her hind legs and watched the treetops sway. "She's asking for something," Reed said one evening. "She's asking for out," Cal replied. So they gave her the choice. The enclosure was expanded. A corridor was built connecting it to the protected forest. A one-way door. Once she left, she couldn't come back. The wild would decide what came next. They waited. For a week, Fern ignored the gate. Then one morning she walked to the opening. She turned, pressed her head into Bramble's shoulder, then trotted through, and was gone. Cal sat in the grass for hours. Bramble didn't follow, didn't panic. He just watched the trees. "She's ready," Cal whispered. The next morning, she was back. She came and went for weeks, each trip farther longer. Then one day, she didn't return. Bramble stayed by the gate for days. Then one evening, he too walked into the forest. Cal waited. Every morning. Sat on the bench he'd built near the edge of the woods. Nothing. Not for days. Then weeks. Until one foggy morning, there was a sound in the underbrush. Cal turned. Bramble stood there. Beside him was Fern, and beside her, stumbling clumsily across the pine needles, was another tiny bear cub. Its fur was so new it still bore the fluff of infancy, its steps unsure, like it hadn't quite figured out where its paws ended and the earth began. It tripped once, over nothing, then let out a surprised grunt that made Fern pause and look back. She waited for it to catch up before nudging it gently toward Cal. 3 generations. Cal's breath caught in his chest like a bird trying to break free. Bramble approached first, steady and slow, her dark eyes never leaving his. She moved with the weight of years behind her, the silent dignity of a matriarch who remembered everything. She paused a few feet away, then took a final step forward and dropped something at Cal's feet, an old, battered boot. Cal stared at it, his boot. The one he'd lost the previous summer crossing the creek. He'd searched for it, blamed the current, thought it gone forever. But Bramble had found it, carried it all this way. A gift, or maybe a reminder. Cal didn't dare reach for it. Not yet. He watched as Fern came next, her shoulders tense but her steps sure. Her cub was close behind, snuffling the air, stepping sideways more than forward, until its tiny nose brushed Cal's fingers. It paused, sniffed again, and then, without warning, clambered into his lap in a tangle of soft limbs and clumsy confidence. Its snort of approval was almost comical, brief and certain, as if deciding, "This is mine now." Cal didn't move. His hands remained open at his sides, his breath shallow, his heart loud. He looked up. Bramble rumbled softly, a sound not of warning but of greeting. A thread of memory in it, a sound she'd made once before, long ago, when Cal had first stood still beneath the fir trees and earned her silence instead of her wrath. They stayed that way for almost an hour. The cub curled up against his leg, then tried to chew on his coat button. Fern lay down a few feet away, watching with one eye closed and the other half-lidded. Bramble stood behind them, a sentinel, unmoving. The sun shifted across the clearing, and the wind rustled the canopy like it was afraid to speak too loudly. Then, just as gently as they had come, they left again. Fern gave a low call, and the cub slid from Cal's lap like a puddle of fur, toddled back to its mother. Bramble turned first, slipping between the trees without a sound. Fern followed, pausing just long enough for the cub to look back one last time. But they kept coming back. It was never on a schedule, never when Cal expected. Sometimes it was months, sometimes seasons. But whenever Fern had a cub, she brought it to him. Each one different, some bold, some shy. Some climbed onto his lap like they belonged there. Some only circled once, sniffed his boot, and ran back to Fern. But they all came, let it see him, smell him, sit beside him, learn him. And always, Bramble watched from the trees. The silent, aging guardian who once could have torn Cal in half but chose not to. Her eyes softer now, her body slower, but still, always watching, approving, trusting. And Cal waited. He came back to the same spot every spring, sat on the same weathered stump near the edge of the glade, brought nothing but himself. No food, no camera, no cage. He never caged them, never called, never tried to follow. He didn't tag them, didn't name the cubs, he didn't need to. His presence was the only tether, and it was gentle, invisible, not a leash, a thread. He just opened his hands and said with his presence, "If you need me, I'll be here." He didn't demand their company. He didn't expect affection. He simply showed up, season after season, willing to be chosen, or not, and they always found him. Even when he grew older, even when his knees protested the walk and his hands trembled from the cold. He never missed a spring. And every year there came a soft rustle in the woods, a shadow among the trees, and then the unmistakable shape of a bear. Sometimes Bramble, sometimes Fern, sometimes a new mother with a cub Cal had never met before. Because he never asked for their trust. He earned it, and the wild gave it back.